Thanks for doing this. I also appreciate your review. You did an awesome write-up and said some kind things. So thanks for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I've been a longtime supporter of indie films, and I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I pulled out my last Starfighter vinyl for the backdrop here.
Awesome.
And I
You're
see
lucky
you,
you have
huh?
that shelf space. You're lucky you have that shelf space. I'm
Oh,
this I love physical media. It's the only thing I watch, but I
sure.
have this sad the thing that makes every collector cringe.
Hmm.
I have, except for my favorite like 100, all of them are in binders. I just don't have the space.
Yeah. Well, I only have the space because my wife family video closed in town, and so they were giving away, like, if you came and picked them up, you could have a shelf. So
Awesome.
this is an actual family video shelf that I
Awesome.
rescued. She said I could have one, just one. I was like, they're free though. We've got a truck. She's like, you can have one. I'm like, okay. So yeah, I saved a little piece of history and bought a couple of the signs too, like a classics for $1 rental signs that they had in the must-see
Awesome.
movies. One there is as well. But yeah, I love my physical media. In fact, I have a couple of your films that you've been in.
Oh,
Uh,
which
where
one?
on physical media. I've got what do I got here? I've got Moon of the Blood Beast. I got over here. I've got Xanadu Hellfire
Oh,
over
that one's a
here
good
as
one.
well. I Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I
That's a
saw
good
your
one.
I looked at your acting reel, and I will tell you, some people will be like, "Oh, I got to meet so and so." I'm like, were you really ahead of Ghidorah or Ghidorah?
I sure was.
Oh
Yeah.
my, this
That's
has made me more excited. That's Oh yeah, I love the poster. I've
Mike
got
signed
this.
it. Mike signed it, and
Oh,
he
nice.
gave us cool. Everyone who was involved, he gave us that, and then also a leather bound notebook with it's like it's not embroidered, but whatever, you know
Sure.
how like has like stamped into it.
Hmm.
It's the Monarch logo.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
and then he wrote a nice message. Thanks for bringing our monster to life. So he was very gracious.
Man, when I saw that on your acting reel, I was like, no way, because I'm a huge kaiju guy. I've got actually King of the Monsters on vinyl as well. I end up collecting vinyl
It's a good
because
soundtrack.
well, and it's funny because looking at your filmography, Alien Planet, you chose to direct, and I was floored by the amount of prosthetic work that you had in this film for an indie project, because I've been covering indie for a long time, and I know how not only complicated but budget straining something like that could be. So I was impressed by that, and then looking at your body of work, I'm like, you know what? I've been admiring the work of this guy for years, and I didn't even know it. Didn't even know it. He was the mouth for the Ginger Dead Man, for Evil Bog 5, 666, 777, 888. I watched all of those. Bloodsucker Jones versus the Creeping Death. You were in that. You did the voice for Genevieve. I've seen that. Xanadu Hellfire. I'm like, I've seen
Wow.
lots of you know,
Yeah. Wow.
I've covered all of those films in one way, shape, or form. Even Thanksgiving 3, which mad props for doing Thanksgiving 3.
Thank you. Actually, I just spoke to those guys.
Mhm.
They were the first monster suit I was in a movie.
Really? Really?
Because Jordan played Muff, which is like
Right.
the alien
Hmm.
thing. I don't know what it's supposed to be. But I filled in for him for a day. He said I could fill in because I was actually there in South Dakota with them editing. I was kind of doing on-set editing, doing an assembled cut for him. And I got in the suit and did it for him. And that was actually my first in a suit for a film.
Wow. Well, that's definitely an interesting one to cut your teeth on for suit work. And so I apparently I've been following your work for years, and I didn't even know it. So we
Well,
come to, you know, you could come to Alien Planet here. So what made you want to direct?
Well, I've always wanted to, I think in a
Mhm.
way. Um, when I first moved to Los Angeles, when I came out of college, that was kind of what I said I wanted to
Mhm.
do. But I mean, that's so every stupid college kid says that's what they want to do. Like
Sure.
every dumbass 20-year-old wants to be a writer or director. Um, and I said it too. I was one of those dumbass 20 somethings. But then I started getting my foot in the ground for like post production and editing
Sure.
because LA is, it's a very expensive place to live. So you have to get your foot on the ground and established in order to, have income coming in. So I was going down that path for a very long time. And I started getting into creature performance and doing that. And so my jobs, my paths were editing and creature performance. And I never really looked at writing and directing again for a long time until just a certain point where I was getting the bug. I
Mhm.
was like, you know what? Yeah, I want to do it. I have some stories I want to tell, and I think it's time. And so after being established in the industry for a while, I just did it.
Well, and that way you had some connections too. I imagine, for resources, and you have some friends, especially uh that you develop relationships over the years that I'm sure that you could call on. And you know, even in my circle, I'm in the middle of Wisconsin, so I'm probably as far away from anything Hollywood known to man, right? But if you meet someone and you go, "Hey, I'm thinking of making a movie, you want to help work out with it?" Usually people will be like, "Oh yeah, sure." Yeah, and
Well,
I'm
it
yeah,
areas, yeah. In LA, it's a little bit harder because it's our jobs. Like
right, right.
it isn't a let me help you out for fun. It's,
No,
it's how to pay our bills. And so
right.
it is more of a job and an offer, and you
Mhm.
have to negotiate rates and time and schedule. I think when you do go to places like Wisconsin, and I grew up in Michigan, so I get
Oh,
it.
okay.
Um, People are excited because it's not there. There's not a lot of
Mhm.
filmmaking. You do say it. Anyone will help, but here it's definitely it's a
Sure.
job. I think it has a different mentality for a good reason because I mean we have bills.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I was going with that. It's like, here, you do that. There, sure you can, but it's like, well, what's the pay? And let me look at my schedule. And well, I got this thing with Cameron where I got to be an alien on a blue planet for like a year. So maybe next year I could do it.
But there's also favor stuff. Alien
Mm,
Planet was a favor movie. While I
mm,
paid it wasn't, union rates. It
mhm.
was an independent film with a low budget. And so everyone who worked on it was a friend and was gracious enough to work for in a lot lower rate than what any of us would normally work for. So I'm very grateful for the entire cast and crew because I think everyone also believed in the project and they saw how exciting and fun it was going to be. And it was. I mean, everyone was just amazing and we just had such a fun time during our month of filming.
And that fun comes across on the film. I mean, everybody's into it. I didn't feel like anyone was say cashing it in, so to speak, or just going through the motions. Everybody seemed to be into these parts, but I imagine part of that is the makeup work. Now, I imagine that was probably the most of your budget, but where did you come up with the designs for the creatures, and how did you go about getting the resources? Because you have prosthetic effects throughout this entire film.
Yeah, so it was probably about half the budget of the movie went
Mhm.
into the makeup and puppets and monster suit and all the practical effects. So half the budget was gone just during pre-production.
Sure.
Um, Coming up with the design was multiple steps. So
Sure.
these characters were kind of things that I conceived, and what I did initially was I drew out what I wanted them to look like, but I'm
Mhm.
not an artist, so they looked like a. Um, then I took screen grabs from other characters from other movies. Like, here's the texture I wanted from this, the color I want from this, the eyes, the lips. And I kind of built a character breakdown for each character where it had my hand drawn thing and then reference photos from a bunch of different movies. Then the next step was I took that to an artist, Aiden Casserly. He actually did the concept poster for my Indiegogo campaign. and he looked at what I drew up, and I even drew the poster that he created. I drew my version of it first, and it again looked like a 5-year-old did it. And then I sent him some reference posters. I sent him the original Battle for the Planet of the Apes poster, and then one of the images from the Topps dinosaur cards that we had as a kid, the really
Mhm.
bloody ones. And I was like, this is what I'm going for. Here's the image I want, and here's a breakdown of the characters. So he took it and he drew it masterfully, like so well, like masterfully. And um it looked amazing. So then I added that to my concept art. It added it to my character decks. Once we were funded, then I took those to the artists. So there were 3 different sculptors for the film. There was Illusion Industries, which is Todd Tucker and Martin Astles. They did the aliens prosthetics, Locke, Cack, Brocheet, Delich, all the
Mhm.
face and
Right.
cowls for that. Then I had Tom Devlin do the Gyri puppet and the Dweller suit.
Mhm.
Um, and I had Scotty Fields do all the plants. So they all got my breakdown of what I wanted and the references and the artist drawings that made it better. And they took it to the next step. They sculpted it. They made it. They upped the ante even more, and just each step we added to it. And there was multiple processes, like for example, the prosthetics for the main characters were Todd, the owner of Illusion Industries. He would call me and send me pictures, and we'd FaceTime. And if we had any adjustments or things that I liked or didn't like, we would tweak it. They were the most important for this movie, so we wanted them to be right. Um, Once all of those were done, they had to go to foam fabrication. So they went to another company, Tim Phoenix. He pulled all the foam. We had 55 prosthetics
Wow.
because you can't reuse them. So
Mhm.
you have to have a new one for every shoot day and a new one for every character. So we had 55 prosthetics. Then after that, Alexis Payanessa, who was our lead painter and on-set makeup department head, she pre-painted all of them. And we went through the process of the same thing. She would send me photos. I would call her. We'd talk about it. We would add more layers, add different colors, tweak it until we were happy. Um, and she did this for all of them. So she probably worked on it for, honestly, she was probably painting for maybe 5 months before we shot.
Wow.
Because we didn't have time on
Right.
set. With the low budget that we had, we only had 12 principal shooting days. There's 14 days total, but 12 were actual principal photography. And when you do that, painting on set, the whole prosthetic would eat up 8 hours of the day, so we couldn't
Mhm.
do it. So props to her. She did all of those and they looked amazing. And it was just a wonderful process because it felt like such a team effort to bring this vision to life. And I was very happy with how they looked. And then when we got on set, I had 4 or 5 makeup artists. I had Alexis, um, Ashley, Shayna, Oliver, and Anna, and they were all applying and painting the seams and doing the touch-ups and stuff every day. Uh, so it was a huge process. It was probably the biggest aspect for the film was the make.
Well, that I mean, but that's the feature front and center is the fact you're doing a genuine alien project to where there's pretty much no human looking thing anywhere.
Yeah.
So you've got where some movies have all digital effects in every single scene. You have prosthetics or practical effects in every scene. And it you pull, and the fact that you pulled it off in that short of a time is very impressive for not only you but your crew as well, that you guys were all able to come together and do something like this on this scope. I don't think people might think of, they're like, oh, well, you only have so many characters. I'm like, yeah, but like you said, you've got 14 days. You can't reuse the masks. You got to shoot the mask, which I imagine probably made for some long shoot days, because how long did it take to get the makeup on them?
We scheduled about 3 hours to get in and
Mm,
2 hours to get out. So
mm,
about half our day, because we shot. I don't think we ever went. A standard shoot day for film is usually 12.
mm,
I don't think we ever went more than 11.
mhm,
We did 10 hours fairly consistently. If there was a heavy day, we went 11. If if we did a 12-hour, it was maybe once, but I don't think we even did. I was pretty adamant about that because what the rates were for everybody.
sure.
And
Mm,
also, I personally think the film industry should be 8-hour days like every other job in the entire country. So I'm trying to stick
mhm,
to my own preferences for that. So we had fairly easy shoot days. They
mm,
were not crazy.
mhm.
And half the days were getting in and out of makeup. But it
Sure.
was also good because while the actors were getting into makeup, it gave time for camera and myself to figure out our shots and the
Mm,
lighting, that stuff, and make sure that we had it ready.
mm. Yeah, and your scenes pull off very well, and you've got some elaborate scenes in here, especially our opening scenes when we're introduced to our main alien character, Locke. Uh, she has kind of the traumatic event in the beginning, and there's effects and things involved, and you know, I appreciate it being an old guy. Well, I say old. I grew up with 80s sci-fi, and
Right.
watching this, it felt like one of those 80s sci-fi films in a good way.
Right.
Enemy Mine, Last Starfighter, and that where the makeup, though they had it probably easier than you because you're shooting high def, so you got to cover up your seams a lot easier, a lot harder, a lot more than say they did back then, right?
Right. And they also had a giant budget.
Well, yeah, there's that too. They had a bigger budget, but still, I mean, they were shooting on film, so you could kind of cover up some of the maybe the imperfections, whereas on HD, everything shows up. Um, and so I loved the Locke character and how she really had far more of a temperamental uh attitude to her than Broshi. The dynamic between these two were great, between Alexander and Hunter. Did they have a chance to, kind of run through things before you did the actual principal shooting? Were they able to meet? And because everybody seemed to have a really good chemistry with each other and work with each other well in this.
Yeah, so we did do a table read and we had many conversations between myself and Hunter and Alexandra about the characters and inspirations and their how their vibe is. But really the credit is 100% to those two. They're both just fantastic actors. So I mean that's why it comes off so good is because they're both just rock solid.
And how did you find your dweller? I mean, you're used to being the guy in the suit, and you had to find a guy in the suit. So how did you go about finding a guy in the suit that you're like, well, maybe I could just do it?
My buddy Eric, he is someone who I've worked with a couple of times previously, but I don't think we ever worked together as actors. I think
Mm.
we kept crossing paths because we're both usually the monster, and he's a tall guy and I'm a tall guy. So usually a movie only has one monster in it.
Right.
But I just called him and I was like, dude, I need you. I need you to be this monster. And he was perfect for it. And he was great. And he kicked ass. And he was perfect.
Yeah, that design of the monster was great as well. And I mean, that's a full body suit as well. Again, you're it was just surprising me watching this going, I know it's an indie film, and but for what you did with the budget you have and now what I know with your shoot schedule, it's very impressive what you were able to put together. Knowing what goes into indie films. I'm not saying I expert, but I talked to enough folks, and I've actually, had the pleasure of working on a couple of indie films. I know what goes into it. So the fact you had to do that, you really need everybody on the same page, but also I imagine people kind of have to put their egos aside when you're shooting like that.
Absolutely, because I think the thing is there's an end goal. Like when you have the script and everything plotted out, and I was pre-proed to death. I had everything plotted down to the hour on set, and I think it just kept us all on the same page. We all knew what we were doing and what we're doing next for the next 10 hours.
Mhm.
So it was, and there were no egos. Everyone was great. Everybody
Sure.
was a team player. And so I think that really helps the process. And it was also, while the movie does have a lot of silly things like over the top blood, a barfing space cat, stuff like that, it does have a very serious
Mhm.
tone. So that keeps, I think, a lot of people focused because it's emotional. I mean, like, there's a lot of scenes where Alexandra's crying.
Mhm.
Hunter is deathly, like, infuriated, and it's just there's a lot of emotion in it, and I think
Mhm.
that keeps people focused too because it's not like laughing well, we laughed like crazy on set, but while the performance was going,
Mhm.
they're working.
Yeah.
Keeps people focused, I think, in the goal of, oh crap, here's where we are.
Mm.
These two people are going at it. We gotta make it
Uh,
good.
uh, well, especially with Locke, with how we're introduced with Locke, what happens with her, the over the course of the film, the hardships they both face. I do like as well that you didn't play the buddy buddy angle, because in films like this usually you have the two different factions on two different sides, and they really hate each other at the beginning, but after they've gone through a traumatic experience together, fight the dweller, we're all kumbaya now. And you know what? I see your point, and I see your point. And here's a little bit of the purple you can take back. We'll split it, and you can take this back to your planet. You don't have that here, and I appreciate that. Was there a natural drive maybe to try to bring it to that conclusion? And did you have to kind of fight that to, like, we can't exactly have it end on a completely like happy note?
There wasn't really a fight for it, no, because it felt more real. Like,
Mhm.
this felt um realistic in real life. If you have two people in that situation, especially with their history of, bro cheats
Right.
people, killed, locks people, murdered, forced immigration. All these things are real things that happen on Earth.
Mhm.
If you met someone who did that to people you care about, you're never going to be their friend.
Right.
And so I think it's something like that. Like, if you're face to face with like a Nazi, you're not going to be like, cool, let's go have a beer. No, you get the fuck out of here. So it's like, realistically, you can learn to put things aside to an extent
Mhm.
to survive, but you can't go down and have Thanksgiving dinner together, you know?
It, and also we did talk about the other character in here. How tough was it for the puppeteering of Gyri? Because Gyri was a surprise for me. Reminded me of the caterpillar character from House 2. If you've ever seen House 2, it looked that adorable, but at the same time adorable and frightening. But what kind of challenges did Gyri bring to the table?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I read in your
Yeah.
review on written up one, you mentioned that, and I was like, I'd never even thought of that, but they do look similar. It's funny. Um, the challenges were, Nahia, she was our puppeteer, and she was just absolutely fantastic. She went above and beyond to bring that character to life on set. Um, we had her in the most uncomfortable positions, in the most uncomfortable terrains, and she did it. And she never once complained, never once had any like meltdowns, nothing. She was just like, she was a pro above pros. It was awesome. Um, and it worked. The puppet comes to life. So many people have a hard time like realizing what it was. I've had people ask me if it was marionette, if there's animatronics. It's just simply an old school puppet, hand in the butt, puppeteered with wrist, hand, mouth. Like, there's nothing else to it. That is all it was. And she brought it to life so well that it confused a handful of audience people.
Well, mission accomplished with that. I mean, you got it definitely covered their eyes with it. And I will say I appreciated you don't see puppets like that much anymore, either animatronic or you see them CGI, which is just something like that you could really tell usually, especially with a smaller budget. So it surprised me you had a puppet like that in here, and more than just a gimmick, because you could have easily gone, okay, we have this, there's a pet, we get 2 scenes, we're done. But Guy
Yeah.
Ritchie ends up playing a major part in the film.
Well, she was always a main character from the beginning,
Mhm.
and that's also something that's tough too because you don't see it a lot because it can be goofy. And she is. I mean, there's no way you could look at Guy Ritchie and be like, that is a very serious character. Like, she is silly. There, she has comedic relief. Even her sarcasm. She's kind of like sassy,
Mhm.
you know, in the movie. And she also has magical barf, and it's like there is no hiding the fact that there is, schlock to this movie.
Sure.
While there's serious undertones, there's a lot of like, someone smashes their head and a whole gallon of blood comes out. So it's a fun ride. So I like to
Mhm.
ride that line of it's an adventure with eye candy. Don't take it too serious, but maybe actually it is serious.
Mhm.
So it's this interesting line of just blending it all
But
together.
and that's the thing, is that's why it really felt like those classic 80s sci-fi, because 80s sci-fi's had the same thing, to where they had campy, cheesy stuff going on, but at the same time, if you look a little bit underneath the surface or whatever, well, there's some messages going on in here. There's some subversive things. There's some other things. So on the surface, yeah, that's campy and that's extra gore, but at the same time, well, let's look at the context and what led up in these characters and what's going on, and wait, and what's the theme, and suddenly you're just like, oh, you've got your global climate resource exhaustion theme in here, which is a hot topic nowadays. It's in here, but you're just like, oh, it's aliens that they're talking about. You're like, oh wait, I just read in a headline yesterday about something very similar.
Well, and also, I mean, we all just lived through something similar. The
Mhm.
pandemic, it was a worldwide virus that shut the whole world down, every country.
Mhm.
So it's like the it's very real.
It is. So even though you have a bit of a cheesy some camp in here, like you say, some schlock, you do still have those serious undertones, which you had in those 80s films that I love. And I think that part's missing in some of the more modern films that try to do homages, or do a little camp. They forget that while there was camp, there's also this theme underneath, and they do the camp part, the sarcastic and the meta, and haha, look at how goofy, extravagant, extra blood, but they miss that, oh wait, there was this theme of nuclear war, there was this theme of, like you say, anti-immigration, um or
And the one
oh, go
thing
ahead.
too, it's like it's very Star Trek. And I think that's the exception to the rule. They still do that in the new Star Trek shows, is
Mm-hmm.
they those social commentaries. But other than that, you're right. Not a lot of movies or shows have it.
No, they focus on the camp part and kind of tongue in cheek poking fun, but they don't get that extra level. We just covered last night on the podcast. We just covered Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, and my one friend had never seen it before. It was his first time seeing it, and he's like, "Wow!" He's like, on a surface, this just looks like that kind of exploitation film, especially considering Russ Meyer's other work, but the more he thought about it, the more we talked about it, we found so many interesting underlying themes and layers and stuff to what people might shrug off as, oh, that's just exploitation film. You're like, no, there's a lot of stuff being said. And you got that in Alien Planet too. People like go, oh, just an indie film, someone thinking they're, so and so or whatever. And you go, no, there's a lot of work put into your film. And there's those themes that are still present that make sci-fi why we love sci-fi, I think.
Yeah, well, what's sad too about it is the reason why that's still so present in sci-fi is because nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Like the reason why all the the social commentary that's in my film still work in 2023, just like they worked in Enemy Mine in the 80s and they worked in Planet of the Apes in the 60s, is because unfortunately we haven't gotten better.
Yeah,
So
that's what's always odd is I'll pop in an old 70s or 80s film and you're watching it, you're looking at the themes in this and you're going, huh, that's still a problem today.
honestly, so it's worth talking about and it's worth making these kind of movies because it is something to think about. And I think too, like, and many people probably hear this in all the behind the scenes or all the documentaries about sci-fi, but it makes it an easier pill to swallow. Like when you watch Locke and Brochit talk about what their two species have done to each other, you can not fully connect the dots until afterwards and then go,
Right.
oh, that does happen still on Earth. But you can, some people process it easier because it feels
Mhm.
less um, pointing a finger at this might be you. Because so it might be actually some of the audience. There's
Right.
probably people watching Alien Planet that the things I'm pointing out, they could be part of that problem, and
Mhm.
they might not be so keen to accepting it if they see a human saying it versus a species that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's always a little easier pill to swallow if it's like just an alien versus versus actual humans. But I mean, you get that with horror too. I think people forget that horror is a huge social commentary, huge morality. It's been in there for ages in horror. And I think with genre films in general, it's easier for people to consume and think about because you have a bit of a disconnect versus showing a drama where you have people in a house and there's
Right.
domestic abuse and you're like, ah, God, I just feel like here we have two aliens fighting and you're like, oh, two aliens are fighting. Like, then you could think about it, but it doesn't quite strike such a deep chord, but still
Yes,
get you to think.
exactly. Yeah. And it's just fun. It's like, it's like I was saying, it's a schlocky movie, but at the same time, it's not.
And the environments and stuff that where did you shoot this out? Was this out in LA in a desert somewhere? Because it was a sparse area, which I've seen some people make commentary on it. I'm like, yeah, well, these people got exiled to a horrible planet. Of course it's going to be sparse.
Well, that was the point, is I want it to look like that because, in the movie is they have water, but it's not a lot. And so they use Zod, which is the natural, sustainable liquid on Rakachi. But it doesn't taste good. So they don't want it, but it helps keep them alive. But there's not a lot there. And that's why at the end, when they add more
Mm,
substance, things start to grow a little bit more. Um, but we shot it in California. We shot it in multiple places, mostly in the Santa Clarita area. We also shot it at Red Rock Canyon, Vasquez Rocks, Thousand Oaks. And then we had a soundstage in the Glendale, Burbank area for the spaceship stuff. And then we actually even did, for the spaceship miniatures, we shot that in Michigan.
oh, nice. Actually, I know there's an indie filmmaker. He's made a number of films, Italian zombie monster film, a giant rubber monster movie is what he calls one of his films, where he does miniature work like massive amount and does kaiju type monster movies and that.
That's
So that yeah, so that's cool that you got to shoot that in Michigan. That just reminded me of him. He's done that type of work as well. So you kind of spread it out all over with that makeup though, and you're out the desert. What kind of challenge did that pose? Did you have like big trailers to go with? Or?
so that, yeah, it was definitely something to think about. Because we shot in November, when it was in the morning, it was freezing cold. And then around noonish, it was extremely hot. That's the desert. So the actors and the crew, we were going from hoodies and winter caps to peeling it all off at lunchtime. Um, but when I chose the locations, I chose it based on shelter and safety. So we
Mhm.
actually had a location that had a house with bathrooms, running water, electricity, places where we could go and shelter and not just force people to sit out in the sun and dehydrate and die.
Right. So oh, that guy died. All right, we're gonna shoot this scene. Let's put him in the scene.
But yeah, everybody had a place to go and cool off and whatnot, or stay warm if they
Or
needed
stay
to.
warm.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, because I was thinking about that where your location was and the makeup. I'm just like, wow, behind the camera, there's got to be so much stuff behind the camera where you're shooting that.
There's days where we had people holding umbrellas over the actors to keep the sun out of them.
Yeah.
And then there's one particular day I remember we had to decide to do some montage walking shots for the actor, and the camera team suggested that we do it later in the day so it could have better sun, so it wasn't just like beaming, solid light. But my thought was, but if we wait and do the close up later, then they're going to be all melted. The makeup's going to look more rough. So we had to do a swap around and we did the wides after so that the
Oh,
close ups want to look nice and fresh.
sure.
Have them do the wide walking shots after because you're not going to tell that their makeup's starting to look a little run down.
Well, I
but
imagine with the foam rubber didn't quite like the extreme temperatures too much. I imagine.
but it's a bummer because the camera team made a good point and I wanted to shoot it when they suggested because it would have looked more pleasing to the eyes. But sometimes you have to think about um, many obstacles.
Right. Well, and they're thinking of this shot, and you're thinking of the next five shots that you
But
have.
it's great. What makes it good too is you have everybody looking out for what's best, and then you can take all of them and go, cool. How do we decide which one is the best? But like everyone's intentions are for the greater good, and that's what I love about it. Is everyone was out to make the best movie possible.
Well, you did make a great film, I thought. Quite a bit, very entertaining, very different from what you see in the indie scene a lot. I even dug the plants. I loved the plants that you come randomly across. I likened them to the spider in Flash Gordon 1980 with the arms poking down. They kind of reminded me of that a bit.
Yeah, it was a little bit of that, a little bit of Sam Raimi, a little bit of Little Shop of Horrors.
Mhm.
We went for all the inspirations we could for previous plant monsters.
And it helped create the environment enough, I think, to just make it feel alien, so you don't feel like you're on the desert in Santa,
On
in California. You're actually on a different planet, which um
we only had one plant too, so we had to reuse that thing on every shot. The little one that does this on the ground.
yeah.
We just had one, and so for every shot, we had to figure out where it went. Took a shovel, dug a hole, put it in. Had someone puppeteering it with a string, and because that's all it was. It was a string, so just someone was standing behind it, pulling two strings.
Wow. So, say it was in every shot, so it was the diva of the movie then, huh?
Real star.
The real star is the plant. It's in every shot. But and that's what I love is the work that you put in, and the scenes. It flows nicely. I like the story, and everything about it that just came together. What would you say though? There was a scene because you said you did a lot of pre-production on it that you planned out, that you figured this scene's just gonna be a bitch. This scene's gonna be just so hard. I don't know how we're gonna do that. It's gonna be a challenge, but it ended up being a very easy scene that went off smoothly. That you're just like, holy wow, that went far better than I figured it would going. You have any scenes like that?
Um, that went much easier than expected. Um, no, I think they were all. I'm gonna think about this, and at like 4 a.m., I'm gonna think of an actual answer. But no, the scene that I felt in advance was gonna be a difficult scene, I just allowed more time for it so that we had time to figure it out.
Mhm.
And so it made it more appropriate to, like the big fight scene at the end. Um, that one I knew was going to take a lot of time. So I made that little bit, which is only probably what 2 or 3 minutes. I gave that an entire day.
Mhm.
I knew we would need it. Um, the all the can we say spoilers? Do you think
Sure,
it's
it's up
good
to
to
you.
say
That's your call. It's your movie. So
spoiler if anyone's gonna watch the movie? All the death scenes, we tried to get ahead. So when if we felt we were ahead of schedule on certain days,
Mhm.
or if we had a free moment, we would shoot the death scene of a character so that on the last day we didn't have so much to get through, and that actually made it better because the last day we had a lot to do, and I was very grateful that we had already picked up most of the death scenes because that was one thing we got ahead of the schedule on, so I'm grateful we did that. um what else was there? Trying to think if there's one. uh the stuff when they were captives to the dweller,
Mhm.
that those were interesting because while they went according to plan, um, time-wise, they were much easier than expected because it's such heavy emotion that you never know how it's going to go in pre-production. You never know if there's going to be a lot of alterations or adjustments. But because, we previously gave, the props to Alexandra and Hunter, but because those two were so good, those were just they went so smoothly. Like all of those scenes because it's heavy dialogue.
Mhm.
There's a lot back and forth. I don't think there was ever once where we were like, um, what's the line? Or did we miss a chunk? Like it was just everybody was on their A game, and those two, it's a lot of dialogue back and forth for a solid, like that's probably what, 30 minutes of the movie. And they killed it. So those two, I have to give a big thank you to those two because it's those two. I think that was a whole week. We spent, I think, 5 days doing those scenes, and that could have been difficult if the actors were not good. So I'm just so grateful that those two were phenomenal because that did go very, very smoothly.
And that's where the most of the heavy scenes and such come from, and especially the emotion between those two as they're literally feet away from each other, hated enemies, yet you have this other enemy who just wants to eat them both. And they're
Yep.
split between, I really hate you, but I might need you to get out of here, but I really hate you. And I wouldn't shed a tear if you got eaten, but at the same time, I kind of need to get out of here.
Kind of do. There's moments where they do have, sadness for each other, particularly when Locke thinks Brocheet is dead.
Mhm.
Uh, she takes a moment to, cross his arms, say goodbye, and leave him there.
And then leave him there. He's like, ah, that's about all you're worth. I'm gone.
It's better than most would do for someone who, you know, killed their kind.
Now you did mention crowdfunding with this. How did your campaign go, if you don't mind me asking? Because I've heard mixed feelings about doing crowdfunding versus trying to get, private financing. So I guess how was your experience with the crowdfunding?
It's difficult. I mean, it is hard. It was probably way more difficult than making the movie itself. Um, it was it was very exhausting, very difficult to do. But it's a means to an end.
Right.
I could not have gotten the movie made without it because I don't personally know any private investors or backers, people that would be willing to put up. We raised about 70 grand. I don't know anyone who would give me that. So, yeah, it was needed, but it was very difficult. I think my advice for anyone who wants to do crowdfunding is don't rush it and do your homework because a lot of prep. I prepared for my crowdfunding for about 6 months.
Wow.
And I also shot a spec trailer as a proof of concept to prove to the audience what it would look like. And I think I don't think I would have been as successful if I didn't do that prep because it was a lot of work. So yeah, yeah, I understand the mixed feelings because I even have mixed feelings because I think to myself, will I do it again? There's a chance because I do have another movie I want to make. Um, and I have to get it made somehow. Do I want to? No, I wish I had an angel investor, but we not everybody has nepotism or connection, so I think sometimes you have to go that route and do it.
No, I think maybe your next time around you might have it a little bit easier because now you have a demonstration of your skill. You have your demonstration of what you can produce. Because I think that's a lot of the hesitation some people have for investing in a film is, oh yeah, these guys want to do a full alien thing with masks and stuff. They know very little, but they know what they've seen on the big screen. They're like, you guys aren't going to pull it off. You're just going to take my money and I'm not going to see anything, but now that you have Alien Planet as your
Yes,
example.
exactly. Yep. And so there's unfortunately there's a lot of filmmakers who do that. There's a ton on Indiegogo and Kickstarter that they raise a lot of money and then they just disappear or they turn out garbage movies that could have been made for like 3 grand and it's very clear that they pocketed money. So I mean there's a lot of bad vibes out there for investors to be hesitant.
Yeah, it's the old saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch, but it is actually true. Some people, they'll get burned. And I have friends too who like fund for certain games, tabletop games, that do Indiegogo, and they may not see it for years. These guys promise, oh, it'll be out next year. And then next year comes around, you're like, well, we got another year yet. And another year. And finally the game might come out like 3 years after it was promised. So, you mentioned you got a new project. Is it another sci-fi project with makeup effects and guys in rubber suits?
Um, yes and no.
Ah,
Um, I can't say too much about it because it's very early
right.
stages.
No. Yeah.
But yes, there are prosthetics involved. It's a another sci-fi type film, but it's not the level of Alien Planet.
Uh,
The thing about Alien Planet, and I could be wrong, I want someone to prove me wrong, but I believe it's actually the first live action movie with no humans in it. The only other one I can think of is The Dark Crystal, but those are puppets.
those are puppets. Yeah, that it could be. It's there's very few and far between if they are.
Most
You
movies like
know,
this have at least one human. So I really want the internet people to figure out, is this the only movie that's actually been made with no human characters?
with absolutely no human. Everybody is alien in it.
Uh,
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to think back. That's a tough call because usually sci-fi has one human in it, so the audience has someone to connect to. They're like, oh yeah, you know, Battle Beyond the Stars. You had one person from Earth, played by George Papard, no less. So I mean, oh, that's a fun movie. It's like you tell people, oh yeah, that's Seven Samurai in space, and you're like, what? I'm like, yeah, just watch it. You'll get
God, you'll like
it.
it.
You'll get it. You'll get it. Don't worry. Just like when you tell someone, well, yeah, Pamela Anderson's Barbed Wire. Yeah, it's a remake of Casablanca, and they're just like, what? I mean, very loose remake, but nonetheless, that is the
Well, this is like,
inspiration.
Alien Planet was heavily inspired by Enemy Mine.
Mhm.
Enemy Mine was heavily inspired by Hell in the Pacific. Everything is heavily inspired by something. So it's like,
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I always get to is it. And when I was younger, I had that more criticism of like, oh, this is just a repeat of such and such. But Hollywood's been borrowing from itself since the beginning of time. I mean, people talk about Scarface, and you're like, yeah, did you know there's a 1930s film called Scarface about a gangster? And,
it's like Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was a TV show before the one with Bill Murray.
Mhm. It's like a lot of those movies, you look at them, you're like, oh, that's where that came from. and you can't what's
She took over,
beyond.
she took over my laptop stand.
I do have to ask though, Evil Bong, man. Uh, I've I admittedly have watched many of them more than once. You got to be the face of Ginger Dead Man. How intimidating is that to come after Gary Busey? Because Gary Busey voiced.
So luckily, until the last movie, I never voiced him. I was only the mouth.
Oh, you're only the mouth.
Um,
Okay.
so, so in Evil Bong, I could be wrong. Fans, tell me if I'm wrong. I think I'm in Evil Bong 5, 6, 7, and is there an 8?
There's an 8. You're an 8 too, according to the. But you might have
Maybe.
been
Yeah.
in a recap montage. So it's hard to say with
Yes.
those films.
So, so I'm in those as the mouth. Basically, I put in the teeth, they paint my mouth, and then I will be very, very still and I'll perform the dialogue. And then they superimpose that onto the puppet. And then the actor who voices it comes in and lip syncs to what I did with my mouth. But in the most recent spin-off, the Ginger Weed Man,
Yes. Mhm.
that one I played the Ginger Dead Man and his voice because he wasn't a little puppet. He was a full-sized
Okay.
guy. And so I did the mouth, the body, and the voice. So I
Wow.
got to after 8 movies and like 3 commercials, I finally got a raise.
you got you got to fully imagine the Ginger Dead Man. I just what
It
you know
was
what
fun. It's like one of those things where I watched the first one with Gary Busey when I was a kid. So I was like, it was super cool to be asked to do that because I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'll do that.
how could I not? It's which is great. Which is great. I love the fact that you're willing to to do the risk, take do something like that because I know some people out there were going like, oh, Charles Band, you want me to do Evil Bong? Well, no, I'm sorry, I just can't do that. But you're like, yeah, I watched Ginger Dead Man. Hell yeah. Robin Sidney is awesome. Uh, I and apparently now she's married Charles Band. It's crazy. I'm like, what? Like,
It's such a fun crew. Like, Brooks Davis is
Mhm.
awesome. I've worked with him so many times. And he keeps bringing me back for the mouth stuff because he voices the Ginger Weed Man, but I do the mouth work for it. So I actually put on the Ginger Weed Man prosthetic and I'll do the performance and he's behind the camera filming me and then he goes and he does the voice. Um, and then John Lachago, I don't think he works with them anymore, but I worked with him so many times on, I think I did a bunch of the Ginger Dead Man commercials and then Blade, which is Puppet Master. And I feel like another one with John, but oh, the Killjoy movies with John Lachago.
Mhm.
And he's just so great to work with. And everyone who works at Full Moon is usually fans. Like you have Tom Devlin does a lot of their prosthetics, and it's because he's a fan of that stuff. And so it's a lot of fun working with that team because it's people who like schlocky movies.
It's kind of like those who work with Trauma. They're fans. They grew up with it. They're usually fans. He usually has fans in his staff, and I think it's important when you're filming movies like that they're fans because they understand what they're making. Which I'm sure some people get that is like, how could you make something you like? You're under no impression or disillusion of what you're actually making. You know what you're making.
Right. I've never once thought I was going to win an Oscar for mouth performance of the Ginger Dead Man.
Though with the way the Academy is, who knows at this point? No, but what would you say is one of your biggest influences as far as movies go? Did you have a specific movie or director that maybe or performer who would be one of your biggest influences in your work?
I think as a filmmaker, heavily influenced by, I love Tim Burton.
Mm.
I think he's a wonderful filmmaker. Rob Zombie, I love his style. Um, many films. George Lucas, it's hard not to put him in there. George Lucas is amazing at world building and creating anything. I mean, everything from behind the camera to on the camera, he changed our entire world and social status and filmmaking and how we view storytelling and everything. I mean, he's a legend. It's funny how much crap people give him because nothing would be the way it is without him. And it's insane. He's awesome. And then as for performers, I don't know if I have any that inspire me because so many are so good. I feel like I'll see performances and it will inspire me. Um, I mean, it's hard to watch Jim Carrey and not be inspired. I feel like I love everything he ever does. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's so many. There's never been like the pinnacle, this one person.
Right.
But lots of things, and even small scale, watching, Brooks make movies or John LaChiago, all their filmmakers, it helps inspire me to go, cool. They're doing the thing, and I love it. It's awesome. And it's the same with like, Kevin Smith. You see, he was an underdog. He's the classic underdog who has done it and
Yeah.
still do. Can't help but watch a Jay and Silent Bob movie and go, that's inspiring. Watch him come from where he did, turn ordinary people into giant stars. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And I think why those guys strike you so much or strike us as an audience is because it's genuine. So many, and that's the thing. And I've had that many discussions. There's so much content out, so much content, and so many tools available for people to make things that mad props for anyone who wants to make something. But at the same time, you know, you've got to take a little care. It's not just, I mean, Kevin Smith didn't just shoot his buddies. I mean, they had work involved. It wasn't, you know, Alien Planet wasn't just, oh, I just called up some of my friends. We just slapped it together. They had this stuff, there's planning and structure involved, and you have to have some of that skill in order to make something that is going to appeal to more than your circle of friends. And that's not saying you shouldn't make that to cut your teeth and figure things out. But if you're going to start putting stuff out into the world, you got to take a little more care. And I've seen some movies where they haven't, and you're just like, I mad props to your spirit, but at the same time, probably should have kept it with your friend.
Yes, 100%.
And I think that's where there's a stigma with indie films that you know, my very little part that I try to do is just spread the word about indie films because there is, admittedly, there is a lot of not so great indie films, but there
Yeah.
are ones such as Alien Planet or here in Wisconsin, Mr. John Pata did Dead Weight. He's been in the indie scene for quite some time. There's a film, The Stylist, done by Jill Six from Saint in Kansas City. Um, there's indie films that strike you that are out there where their care has been put in. It's just getting people to watch the indie films because you got to kind of watch the other not so great ones to get to the great one because you're not sure until you pick the film up, right?
And it's a blessing and a curse because the reason why we have so many bad ones now are it's so much easier to make. Back when, we talked about Kevin Smith, when he made Clerks, you had to have film. It was harder. You had to get it developed. It took more time, more money. Whereas now you can literally just shoot it on your phone. Um, that opens the floodgates for things like what YouTube is. YouTube is a bunch of garbage. There's some good stuff in there, but there's probably more garbage. And same with indie films. But not to say there's anything bad about it because I would rather have a world of people creating than just sitting there judging and criticizing.
Right.
And so it's good because it allows us the tools to make a movie for much cheaper and more accessible. But it does open the gates of now that there's more bad ones, it does give a stigma, like you said, to independent films.
Yeah, you say micro budget, where they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, but you should still watch it because, and you're right, the digital age, but I think the digital, in some ways, has even hurt the big movies and big Hollywood films because you know, eh, not to sound like the get off my lawn old guy, but some of even the big wide release films and some of the problems that these $100 million films are running into now, I think, is you have digital, so you can literally shoot up to the week before film release if you want. Whereas, like you mentioned, George Lucas, Spielberg, the 80s, early 90s, shooting on film, you planned out. It cost money to do film. It took time to develop film. It took time to do special effect elements for the film. So you had to take a lot more care in how long you were shooting and what you were shooting back then versus now, even for the big Hollywood films.
Yes. Speaking of modern day things with film, there's up until I think it was season 6 or 7 of The Walking Dead, they actually shot on film.
Really?
I went to a Q&A of, I believe it was when they first introduced Negan, that big scene where he kills Glenn. Spoiler if no one's watched it.
Yeah.
Um, but that's had such a heavy turnaround, and they shot so much that they had to like push their editing dates
Mm.
because of developing the film and whatnot. And when you go back and rewatch those seasons of The Walking Dead versus the most recent ones, you can actually see it. You can see the film grain. And then even particularly the first season, you can tell it's 16 millimeter, which is awesome. It's so cool that someone's doing that still.
Yeah, and that's not saying that everybody out there is just shooting digitally. There's some shooting on digital film. There's still shooting on film medium. Some of the older, more classic directors who are still working today are shooting on film. But you do notice a difference. But I just think that because it's that double-edged sword, like you said, even with indie films, the stigma that comes with it, though a lot more creatives are getting their stuff out in this way, they don't have to maybe take as much care in the film they make, but at the same time, I think something sometimes is lost in that, and especially social media too, hyping a film. We're
Mhm.
getting films now that suddenly they're pushing out dates, and now that's actually kind of hurting the film because everybody's like, "Oh, hey, Dune 2 is coming out in November." They're like, "No."
That's true.
Or I saw most recently, I saw trailers like every time. It was Bike Riders, I think it's called, or whatnot. It was a film putting out by Disney about it looked like it was about kind of the Hells Angels 70s motorcycle gang. Um I think it was called Bike Riders or Motorcycle Riders. Anyway, that was a film that they chose not to release, but at least they gave them the option to shop it around. But suddenly the studio just said, "No, we're not going to release this." And I'm like, "What?"
Tax write-off.
Yeah. It was like what happened with the Batgirl film. They literally shot everything. All the principal photography was in the can and they put it on the shelf. And you're just like, I feel for creatives like, yourself who probably put in a lot of time, a lot of effort to do those principal shoots, even. And now you're telling me no one's ever going to see it?
And then particularly, there's actors like actors I think have the hardest time versus crew because a crew you get paid no matter what. I mean, actors do, but in a way like a crew, when you get hired on your next job, they'll still see it on your resume and hire you.
Right.
And I feel like it's different. Like if your big break is say Batgirl and it doesn't come out, it doesn't give you the recognition to book as it would for a crew. Like if you're a grip on Batgirl, it being canned is not going to hurt you from booking more work. But actors that was their big break, they're going to potentially not get their big break anymore because the world didn't get to see their performance, and it may set them back from maybe it'll be 5 or 10 more years before they get another big break. So I feel particularly for people like that where not releasing a film actually affects their career. And it's hard to break into being a grip or PA or anything, but I feel like acting is another level of difficulty to break into on that level. And so I feel for them for sure.
And it's bad juju by proxy too. It's like, yeah, the film's not being shelved because of my bad performance. It's just being shelved, but just that stigma, like with indie film, that stigma of having a film on the shelf that will never get seen. They're like, well, you were in that film. That must have been a bad film. So you were involved in a bad film. So by proxy, you're probably not great. So I don't think I'm going to look at your portfolio. You know, they could be wonderful, but you get that stigma. so, so I guess I would say, what is your? Do you have a particularly favorite film or one of your favorite like sci-fi films, like say a go-to film that you would, you're like, man, if I having just a crap day, I got to watch this. Do you have a particular sci-fi film or that you would watch?
Probably Planet of the Apes. Um, I love that franchise. Um, Usually my go-to is either Escape or Conquest. Those are
Mm.
my two.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends. I love so many movies. I think it's hard. Depends on my my mood for the day. But
It,
I don't know. Yeah, let's go with Planet of the Apes.
see, and I'm like that too. Whenever someone asks me, hey, "What's your favorite movie of all time?" I'm like, how long you've got? Because what genre, what period, what 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 day have I had? What did I have to eat the other? It's one of those things where you're always evolving. I think as a viewer, and you have to. You can't just stick to one thing because you'll miss out on some great things.
Exactly. 100%.
You
Yep.
know,
What about
so
you?
but yeah, I mean, it influence quite a bit. Alien Planet, folks. We'll wrap it up here. Alien Planet is out on streaming, I believe now. Correct, on platforms. Is it out on streaming now? Correct.
Yep. On Amazon, Apple TV, Tubi, some more obscure ones like Reveal, Typhoon, Roku. It's on YouTube with ads, New Video Village, and you can buy it on Blu-ray on Amazon, which I actually recommend because it's going to be the highest quality because I made the master from a 4K master,
Oh, nice.
and it has two making of featurettes and deleted scenes, which are not on the streaming platforms.
I always like watching deleted scenes. A lot of times it's, no offense to any filmmaker, but a lot of times you look at them, you go, oh yeah, I see why that was deleted.
Well, most of the Alien Planet deleted scenes are more like extended. So there's a couple scenes that went from like 10 minutes to 5.
Mm.
So I put it in there so you could see what the other 5 minutes were. But it was very unnecessary for the movie. But it's a cool tidbit if you just want to see it.
Yeah, and always that behind the scenes stuff give you even better picture of what it's like to make an indie film. So
Yeah.
So you got anything immediate projects working on, or is it just that new project that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I worked on a really cool project last month. I unfortunately can't talk about it, but soon I think
Mhm.
information will be out because it's gonna be awesome, and I think I'll be very, very proud of it and want everyone to watch it. So hopefully that can come out soon and we can chat about it.
I would be happy to. If you're not tired of talking to this strange Midwestern guy who just has way too much movies. Uh, and, uh, and where can people keep up with you so that when this announcement is made, they can keep up and follow up and everything?
So my social media is Monster Maxon, Monster_Maxon. Um, or if you want to follow the movie, it's Alien Planet Film, and both are on all of the platforms: Instagram, Facebook, uh, Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. And then Alien Planet just opened a TikTok. Um, I don't have one personally, but Alien Planet does. If ticking and talking is your thing.
that is the big thing nowadays is the TikToking. So well, thank you, Alan. Yes, folks, check it out. I'll put links to everything below in the body of the this podcast, and it'll go up on our channel, and click the links and support Alan, and even check out his other work if you like schlock, because I've reviewed many of these films. You can check out my review and you can see why I really enjoy indie films, because there is talent and folks out there just doing the grind, doing what they love. And yeah, thank you, Alan, very much.
Thank you. This was so much fun.